Hello my friends, welcome back to Carpo's channel. Today I wasn't even going to make this video. I took a bunch of notes and I was doing a little bit of back research to kind of try to catch up on this Agenda 21 story. And I thought, maybe it's not even worth talking about. Half the people probably don't even know what it is. And the group of people who come to the video will be the ones seeking out a video talking about how horrible Agenda 21 is, and it's going to destroy our sovereignty and destroy our country, destroy our lives, and lock us up in camps. I should start off by telling you what it is, if you're unaware, alright? Now, Agenda 21, and the reason why I'm making this video is because I've been asked several times over the last few years to talk about Agenda 21. When are you going to talk about Agenda 21 was a comment I got the other day, and I was like, okay, I better explain my point and where I'm coming from on this, because the folks who come to the video probably aren't going to like what they hear. I don't look at it as a grand conspiracy to disarm the people from their ability to live in a free world or some communist dictatorship, but we'll get to that. First off, what is it? Agenda 21 was a paper, it's a 394-page paper that was written up and signed and agreed to by 178 different countries. Now, mind you, this was 92, so this was 27 years ago now. And this was signed by 178 different countries. And in essence, what it was a voluntary act to try to lower our use on fossil fuels, to try to improve our environment. It was a voluntary call for all countries to do their best to protect their environment for future generations. And there's a lot more to it, but let's just leave it for a moment for what people have made it into. This has become this grand conspiracy. The guys like Glenn Beck, he's one of the most well-known proponents of this the anti-Agenda 21 group. And these are almost all extremely far right-wingers that have the biggest funds towards, anti-Agenda 21. And it really got me wondering, what is the big opposition to it? What exactly does it say? Now, of course, I didn't have the chance to read all 400 pages before I made this, which is fine because I'm assuming most of the people who are against it probably haven't read any of it. But what is this giant fear of environmental protection, and where does it come from? Glenn Beck, he said, when these are implemented, they're going to take away our roads and our cars, and we're all going to live confined to these cities and be controlled like, a communist dictatorship. And how you get that from a bill like this, as if it was a grand conspiracy that was signed to fool the people, is ludicrous to me. The reason being, as I said, there were 178 countries present, and 100 different media organizations present, so it wasn't exactly a secret. And the interesting thing is, when you talk about it being a liberal conspiracy, George Bush was in office at the time when that was signed. So, I guess a person can make what they will of it. I was fascinated to hear the kind of shit people are saying, that it's, that they're allowing them to use mind control techniques. And they're going to lock us. Back in 98, when I first heard about this, I heard about this back when I read Behold a Pale Horse back in 98. And they talked about how they were going to lock us up into FEMA camps, and look at these big gated areas where they're going to lock all the Americans away. And I started thinking about this over the years, and I have a lot of time to process this. Okay, so they're going to control and confine hundreds of millions of people, and who's going to do this, and exactly when's it going to happen? It was in 98 when I first heard they're going to take our guns next year, and here we are 20 years later, and there's more guns than ever. So I've started to kind of laugh at some of these grand conspiracy ideas, but I'm wondering more about where the funding comes from, and the hatred, the vitriol, because it's not just I don't agree with this policy or anything specific in this paper. It's that this is going to secretly be used as a major control device to, My question would be this: even if it's true, and if you're a believer of Agenda 21 as being this nefarious intention, do you really think that they need a paper to put anything into action? In other words, if people have enough power to gain control, they do it behind closed doors. They do all their decision making behind closed doors, and most of this affects us in ways that we're not even aware of, because the big money and the big business is done out of the public view. But this was something that was signed in public view, with the hopes that it could improve for our world for future generations and protect it from us. So the interesting thing is the U.S. hasn't done anything with it in the 25 years. We haven't really done anything. But what has happened is a lot of city councils have fought hard against urban design and planning that is, supposed to improve it for the future. Sustainable things. There was I think in Maryland, 5 city council, members were voted out because they supported urban planning that was more sustainable. There is a strong hatred towards anything that's different or improving the environment, and I'm wondering why there's a disconnect between saying, well, fine, you don't believe in climate change, you don't believe that carbon is polluting, that's fine. But do you believe that you want your local community to be more healthy? I mean, do you believe in environmental laws that will protect you against coal runoff and pollutants and toxins that are in the water supply in your counties? Somebody out there probably has toxic water, and it doesn't have to be that way. There's probably a factory nearby that has avoided regulations and allowed, So this wasn't just an issue of we're going to stop driving cars and everybody has to stop driving. In fact, cars are just one little part of this huge shift of perception that a large section of society has been able to understand, and a large section is really hanging on to this idea that all the liberals are evil and they're out to get you. It's just, I'm not, I don't want to get into the political aspect, but it becomes political. And the more research I did into it and found out how many people are opposed to any type of environmentalism in the Christian community, I'll get to that in a minute, but I want to try to cover as many of these points as I can. The question is this: a lot of folks say is social engineering, okay? But is it really social engineering, or is it social demand for change? And I think that a lot of folks are overlooking this. It's not that the shadow government, is trying to force this on the people. The fucking people are demanding it. The people want it. The people are signing the papers. The people are fighting their governments and petitioning to get more sustainable, I mean, these guys are fighting wars against bike lanes. They're fighting wars against, it's preposterous to me. And I just have to ask the question, who is pushing this narrative that environmentalism is such a horrible thing? Why is it all about, they're just trying to make money off of improving their environment? I mean, it's just common fucking sense, people. Who is they, right? Well, a lot of folks will say they're going to try to take the farmland, and turn it into subsidized housing. But do you realize they're already subsidizing the farmers? They're paying farmers right now not to grow food, and they're paying farmers to destroy their surplus of food so they can fix the market. And this has been going on for as long as farming has been productive in this country. And it's all down to the bottom line, the dollar. And the people have been hoodwinked into thinking the dollar is a person somehow. That a person's dollar is more important than another person's survival, because people have the right to freedom. Some of this has led to even, like John Bainer, you might remember that guy. He actually, in his area, he pulled transit funding for mass transit. He was so opposed to this Agenda 21 that he didn't want any type of, improvement in the city, which also they cut funding to pedestrian infrastructure, as well as the safe routes to school program was eliminated. I was just like, the name of it alone is like, really? And I'm sure these are all side effects of just wanting to resist any type of change. But most folks alive today aren't aware that the fossil fuel industry actually bought out the subway, let's say in LA, back in I think the 40s. They wanted to build roads, and they demanded roads be built across America because then there would be more cars. And sure, that's business. But they've been shutting out business forever, even with, most people don't even realize there was a subway in Los Angeles. They killed the streetcar, they killed the subways. These people have just been compounding their, it's not about standing in the way of their business. The truth is that these people, these fossil fuel interests and larger companies that are trying to suppress any type of environmentalism, They are actually preventing us from doing what we want. So I say, fine, burn your fossil fuels, but allow the solar industry to thrive, allow these other industries to thrive, and they constantly lobby against them. And a lot of farmers say, oh, I don't care about windmills, until they have some on their property. And all of a sudden they're getting a check from the state. And there's tons of people out there who say, wow, this was actually worth it. But it doesn't work for everyone. Nothing works for everyone, and not everyone can agree on everything. And it's a very complex problem. There's another guy, Dan Mays, who was a founding member of the Tea Party. And he was talking about this bike sharing plan that they had in Denver. Regardless of how you feel about bike sharing or scooters or any of that, it was the comment that he said. He said that this Denver bike sharing program was a well-disguised plot to turn the city into a UN commune. And I just thought, these are elected officials that are actually saying these things. I mean, in today's environment, in today's world, the idea that we're still allowing this kind of ignorance to flourish just means we haven't pulled our bootstraps up yet and figured out how to get these people out. I mean, they're morons. They're ignorant. They have no idea what the people want. And I could care less what a person's beliefs or faith says about how you should feel about your leaders or politicians. What I care about is, what does my fellow man think is important, and to what degree and for what reasoning. And the whole idea of a discussion is for both people to present their sides and say, what is your argument? And unfortunately, a lot of the arguments come down to, well, I believe that God created the earth and the earth will take care of itself. Or, you wouldn't believe how much this conflicts with the Bible and the way people interpret it. This idea that we're going to turn into this socialist communist, thing, and that it's evil is ridiculous, because we've had socialism from the beginning, and a lot of people are opposed to any type of any government, but most people realize that it's easy for somebody to say, well, we don't want public schooling or any type of public funding to help people who need it. But everyone saying that is somebody who's doing okay. There's nobody who's suffering who's saying that. There's nobody without an education who thinks, yeah, we should get rid of schools. It's the people that can afford it and afford to pay for it. And so I guess maybe it comes down to how much you care about your fellow man and what you consider to be your neighbor or your brother, your sister. But it sells books. Like I said, a couple of the people I mentioned, including Glenn Beck, both sold books based on Agenda 21. So, as long as you can stoke fear in the hearts of consumers everywhere, you'll be good to go. But there's this fear of a one world government through environmentalism. And that's basically what the fear of Agenda 21 is. And what I'm asking these people is, for the conspiracy theorists out there who believe this, how do you get from A to B? And how do you get from Agenda 21 to full control over everyone? How does environmentalism lead to this? And why would they need to take that method? People talk about depopulation, how they want to reduce the world's population to 1 billion or 500 million. I've heard all the stories, but the question is, why would they need to try? We have plenty of biological agents out there and viruses that could do the job just fine. In fact, if the elites really wanted to, they could go underground to their bunkers and wipe the population out and resurface and live in this wonderful world. But we know that's not what people want, because in order for the world to keep making these materials, to make these wonderful foods that people enjoy, there have to be people to do the work. Now, I guess, yeah, there are too many people, but it's not going to change because, well, let me just say the earth will do the job for us. Humans don't need to depopulate. The earth will do it for us. And so who is affected most by environmentalism and environmental activism in a negative way? I'm asking that question seriously. Who is mostly impacted? Because I hear, oh, they want to put a carbon tax on us, and they want to, take away our car. All this is ridiculous. Saying they're going to take your cars is like saying they're going to take your guns. They never did, and they won't. But can we, the people, say, what do we really need? What do we consider to be imposing on us? Who's really losing in the big picture? Because if the resources were properly divided and fairly shared, then there can be enough for everyone. It's logistics and the way that we handle things. And it's going to get worse. As our corn belts dry up and we have less and less food, we'll have to import more food. And so right now we can just kind of say, oh, I don't believe in any of this shit, but I don't know, we're all going to face it. And it looks like people just want to find an enemy to battle a lot of the time. And it seems like this green movement as the enemy is being perpetuated by those who have means and ends to argue against it. And there's an aspect of it that I ask myself, why does it seem that so many Christians oppose sharing wealth and improving the environment? And I don't mean sharing wealth as in donations. I know that a lot of people give charity. I'm talking about sharing the land, sharing the resources that we have that were given to us by supposedly God, if you believe in, the Bible. What about the rights of the future generations? If this was given to all people to use, well, there's this argument that God gave us that man dominion over the plants and animals. And a lot of evangelicals use that as an excuse to say, well, God will take care of the earth. We're just here to harvest what we want. And you may think that that's a very minority that thinks that way. It's not. A huge percentage of the people in this country are evangelical Christians, and very few of them actually believe in not just climate change, or environmental damage, but the fact that we need to do something about it because it's in God's hands. I've heard this personally from people a lot of times. Well, there's another line of thinking within some of the evangelicals that we were living in the end times. And that mentality is very dangerous because it means that people are comfortable with slipping into decline because in their mind they think that Earth will do what it needs to do and I'll go to heaven and fuck the rest of the world. God will rebuild it, do whatever he needs to do. So I guess if we're going to go with that line of thinking, that people came first, people come first, and people are the most important, and that individual wealth is more important than overall health, which people matter? Which people matter? Who are God's children, right? Improving the environment helps everyone. Leaving the status quo as it is helps the few. It seems like such a simple concept, but there are so many folks like you and I with limited means who are just living, working their jobs, doing their best to survive, who are fighting against environmental change because they're so afraid to either change their ways or to really read and understand these policies that they think that are going to destroy their lives. And the final question I guess I'd like to ask, there's only so much I can say on this. It's easy to say, well, the earth will take care of itself. God will take care of the earth and don't worry about it. It's self-cleaning. But what's to lose by trying to clean up your own yard? I know very few people out there let their yard get completely trashed. Do you expect God to come clean all the garbage out of your yard? No, you clean it up yourself. Would you expect God to fix your toilet for you? Or would you expect God to put out a grass fire that threatens your home? And if you answered, of course, no to all of these, like you should, there are a few people who would say it's in God's hands, let my house burn down. But for the most part, no. People know that you have to take a certain amount of control over your immediate environment. And that's really all we can do as individuals. I'm not here saying everybody has to join in this giant green revolution and stop driving or none of that. What I'm saying is we can have our own beliefs on these things without making up grand conspiracies about a policy which is designed to help future generations. If folks can't see that, then I guess I don't know what else to say to it. It's I didn't realize how much the Christian community had a role to play in this, as much as the evangelicals, which make up a huge percentage. And after hearing several interviews with them, because I listened to a bunch of interviews, and they gave me pretty much, well-intentioned, intelligent people, otherwise, who really say, well, it's in, there's no way we could possibly affect our environment. Meanwhile, the people down the street from them are drinking water that you can light on fire. I mean, we get too hung up on the climate change aspect and don't do enough focusing on the fact that it has everything to do with just the environment itself that we're living in. We are degrading it and destroying it, and maybe we can't repair it. Maybe we can't stop. Maybe it's too far. But in the meantime, we should stop fighting amongst each other and saying, oh, well, you're just a fool for believing in any type of environmentalism. So those are my thoughts on it. Let me know what you think. I'm sure people will. And we'll talk to y'all later. Be well.